Hi, it's LowTech Mama. So the kids have begged me to play for 5 more minutes, so I figured I would hop on and do a quick live to talk about something that is really on my mind, um, and that is popular culture versus home culture. Um, how much of your home life is influenced by popular culture? What do you think? Do you think it's 10%, 20%? Do you think your home life is immune to popular culture? I mean, we talk about like zeitgeist, it's the kind of the feeling of the times that you just can't escape. And how do you shape how do you shape the culture in your home? What are some of the things that you do to invite kind of popular culture in or keep popular culture out of your life? Because that's something that's weighing pretty heavily on me. Because because people tell me as your children grow up, they're going to have to be in the real world. And I feel like the world nowadays is such a multifaceted place and almost kind of like a tribalistic place, that this idea of like the real world and the children having to enter the real world is almost kind of an abstract, you know? It's like, do they have to enter the real world, or do you think that they can kind of stay in circles that more align with where they're at, you know? Do our children really, quote, grow up and join the real world? Or are there many possible, like, real worlds for them to join? Does that make sense? So, like, for example, is the real world a blue collar job? Is the real world a white collar job? Is the real world secular? Is the real world religious? Um, Hi guys. What happened to my face? I don't know. Motherhood happened to my face. That's what happened. Um, but so this idea of like a real world, saying, well, at some point your kids are going to need to join like the real world. Like, what does that mean? Um, the world is kind of what you make it. Sure, you have to be in certain settings and so forth, but I think like the world's gotten so diverse and so sort of tribalistic that it's it's okay if your child doesn't fit in everywhere. It's actually impossible to fit in everywhere. So if you're embracing kind of a low tech lifestyle, um, maybe that's okay. And maybe they don't need to enter like a high tech lifestyle eventually, you know. Um, my face is made for radio. Thanks, man. Oh, you know how to make a woman happy. Um, I wish you joy. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, those are some of the thoughts that I have about that, and that I have about my children's interaction with technology. Um, so so yeah, I mean, do you give your children technology? Is that something that you're comfortable with? What about like exposure to television? Um, what about, I don't know, iPads, even the radio, like, you know, that's something you can kind of think about. Um, I don't know. I think we have to make so many choices as parents. We're just kind of thrown from one choice to the other. You know what I'm saying? Like everything is a decision that we have to do our best in, and we just have to do the best that we can, I guess, you know. So yeah. So my kids are on the playground. They're not in front of a screen right now. Um we're 4 minutes past bedtime, which was not the intention. But, I think children need fresh air. Children need companionship with other kids. And I support that, you know. And if that means getting to bed too late tonight, so be it, you know. Um, there's so much pressure on children nowadays that even, think about like when you were in kindergarten, right? It was like shapes and colors, probably, right? And now they have to learn like the entire alphabet. They have to learn to write their name in kindergarten. Sometimes even before kindergarten, sometimes even to get into kindergarten, so we're pushing our children so hard that, and then so they have this academic challenge. And then at the same time, they also have this sedentary lifestyle. We're sitting, studying, sitting, watching TV. Um, so yeah, miss, if you want to like and subscribe, that'd be awesome. I always appreciate any likes and subscribes I can get. I'm new to YouTube, so I'm not a pro. I'm just a mom sharing some thoughts on low tech parenting because I think it's such a counterculture thing. And I think we have to kind of stand strong. I mean, so many parents I talk to, they feel like all this technology is wrong for their kid, but they still don't take a stand. They still don't explicitly take a stand. They kind of go along with it and say, that's just life now. Is it? It's like all the kids have a phone. Yeah, they do because all the parents are getting their kids a phone. Yeah, but how would I get a hold of my kid? I don't know. Like when I was a kid, if my mom, I guess, had to get a hold of me throughout the day, she would call the school office, right? So like why do you need to get a hold of your kids all day long? It doesn't make sense, they're busy, they're in school. So I don't have Bluetooth. I don't have Bluetooth. Max Caddy, I don't have Bluetooth. I actually don't even have Wi-Fi at my house. Um None of those things. So no, I'm very low tech. I'm actually like literally 5 steps from being more or less like Amish, you know. We don't even have a TV in our house on purpose. Now, my husband and I did have a TV, but when we were dating and when we were married and didn't have kids. But once the kids kind of came around, we decided that, we didn't want our kids growing up seeing us in front of the TV. And as a family, like, sitting at night and, like, watching TV, like, we just didn't want that, you know? Um, it was just not something that was real good for us, so anyway, it's 8:07, the kids have now gotten their time to play, so I'm gonna collect them from the playground, and I hope you guys have a great night. I hope you spread kindness and joy, and I hope you embrace low-tech living, if not for yourself, then for your kids. Please like, subscribe, and listen to more musings by LowTech Mama. Um, be happy, yes, miss, be happy, and subscribe and join the LowTech Mama movement. Maybe we can start a LowTech Mama movement and just collectively say, no, we're not participating in the screen mania. We're not sitting our kids in front of violent video games. We're not sitting our kids in front of screens. We're we're not wasting our children's childhood. Because here's the thing, your childhood is limited, right? You only have a short amount of time of your life when you're a kid. So your childhood is precious, right? You have these like core memories. Do you guys remember being kids and feeling the soil, you playing in the sandbox, and you feel how beautiful the sand feels and all that, right? Do you remember that? Well, your kids, if you put them in front of the TV all the time, they're gonna have the feeling of what the couch felt like and the remote control, and that's gonna be their core memory, right? Hi, Trust. Um, you know, like and subscribe, Trust, if you haven't already. Thanks for coming in. But think about it. Your core memories might have been riding your bike through the neighborhood, playing at a creek, remembering what the fresh grass felt like, it was fresh cut, had a good smell, right? Your kids are going to remember the smell of an iPad, you guys. You know when an iPad comes straight out of the packaging, it still smells kind of plasticky? Yeah. Do you want that to be their core memories? Or do you want them to have like real, live, core memories? You know? And that, you know what? That in its essence is the whole point of my YouTube channel. It's to advocate for a low tech. I'm not saying no tech. I'm not saying we don't use light bulbs, okay? I'm saying I literally don't have Bluetooth. I am saying I don't use Wi-Fi, okay? But that has nothing to do with that. But I also don't use technology as a babysitter for my children. I don't use technology for, quote, learning about the world. So I don't sit my kids in front of the computer to like learn stuff. When they do schoolwork, they do it, guess what, on a piece of paper, okay? Which is like more work for their teachers. I get that. But it's a core memory. Do you remember when you were a kid and you were writing? Um, I don't have Roblox. But like think about it, like when you were a kid and you were writing and you can feel like the pen or the pencil kind of gliding over the paper. Do you remember that? Or a crayon, it's kind of like putting that pigment on the paper. Do you remember that? Do you remember what crayon smelled like? Do you remember that? But our kids now are getting handed an iPad with a coloring feature. So they don't have that tactile experience of like all the senses. You know what I'm saying? So like a kid sitting in gardening, for example, they're sitting in the yard gardening. They can feel the soil, and their senses are actually more sensitive than ours. So they might smell the soil much more intensely, right? But I feel like so many kids are kind of being indoor parented, you know, like it's too dangerous to let them like ride their bike like we used to, right? You can't ride your bike around the neighborhood. I get that. Like I don't let my kids ride the bike around the neighborhood. There's no way, right? So let's establish that. So we kind of have to go into the wild like with them. And by into the wild, I mean just out of the living room, away from the television. You know what I'm saying? And you know another thing too that I'm working on is like reading, right? We tell our kids like it's important to read. Fine, it is important to read. But do I personally sit around and read a book a lot? I'm actually super busy. Does my husband sit around and read? No, he does audiobooks. So really, um, I guess we have to set an example, you know? I mean, I was talking to my husband and we've decided like we are going to sit in the living room and like read a book in front of our kids just to ourselves and say, oh, it's my special reading time for me. And we're going to force ourselves to read a book to show the kids like, hey, this is a good thing, you know? This will be good for your life. It's a good experience. So I think, you know, we can't sit in front of the TV and preach to our kids like, hey, TV is bad for you. We can't have our phones out all the time and tell our kids like, hey, get off the phone. You know, that doesn't make sense, you know. So like and subscribe, you guys. Let's keep talking about low tech parenting. Um, let's keep our mind open and let's remember like we are the parents, you guys. We can say no. We can say no. And our kids might be like, well, but Jimmy gets this or that. But Jimmy gets a lot of other things. Jimmy has a whole different family. Jimmy has a whole different family dynamic, right? So like with my kids, I always tell them when they give me the argument that blah, blah, blah can do this or that. It's like, so what? They have a totally different family, you know? They might be driving a Ford and we don't. And it's like, who cares? You know what I mean? So I'm getting all heated. As you can tell, I'm like really passionate about this subject. I just feel like we're not doing our kids a favor by sticking them in front of screens. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to collect my kids from the playground. I see them playing right here, and I hope you all have a good night and join me for some future lives. Have a good night.